We often say that feedback is a gift, but sometimes we wish we could go to some store and just exchange it. As product managers, we are leaders in our teams. We are responsible to create harmony between different perspectives, disciplines, and personalities. And if we're actually good at what we do, we ensure continuous learning. So if you are a product manager who is driven about feedback, you are at the right place, because today you will get practical tips on how to build team culture of healthy giving, receiving, and processing feedback so that everyone, including you, can evolve, build better partnerships, and feel heard. Hello, leaguers, and welcome to today's Practical Wednesday, a session that is all about helping you develop your product management skills. And today, feedback. By the way, it's great meeting you. My name is Maria Cassis, and I'm the founder and general manager of Product League, where we are helping you to become the best product manager you can be. Product League is a mentoring program for product managers by product managers. And if you're new here, please let us know who you are. Type your name and where you're from and what you do in the comments, because we really want to get to know you better. And if you want more tips, how-to videos, articles, and everything product, so you can become the best product manager you can be, please go ahead and like this video and our page or channel, wherever it is that you watch us right now. So you'll be notified about all the great content that we are creating just for you. And today, as I told you, it's all about feedback. It's about the gift of feedback. And I have a very special guest joining me today. It's Britt Barak, that I'm so happy to welcome to our floor, because Britt is a friend. So she's not just an amazing product manager. She's not just a great speaker, but she's a person who actually brings a smile on my face when I see her. How are you today, Britt?
I'm so enchanted by you. I'm so happy to be here. Wow.
Yeah, it has been a long time since we did something together and since I saw you. So I'm so happy about the opportunity to have you on our stage, on our floor, and have everyone in the audience getting to know you a little bit better. Exactly right. This is our product party together. And just so you know why I am so excited about having Britt here with us today. Britt Barak is a product manager at Meta, previously known as Facebook in London, United Kingdom, and she's working on developer platform product. She started her professional journey as a mobile engineer and manager in multiple startups, and then moved to manage dev products. Britt is passionate about tech communities. She has been a worldwide public speaker. She ran dev communities in Israel, and she was a part of the Google Developer Expert Program. And if that is not enough, she is the person to talk with us about feedback culture that can actually make everyone into becoming a better product manager.
That's right.
I think this is like your cue to start, because I'm like
OMG.
energized. I just want to hear you. It's all about you now.
Oh, wow. Let's do it then. No?
Yes. Shall we?
Woohoo.
You are on. I'm going off.
On. I'm shining.
Yes, and everyone in the audience, as I said, we want to get to know you better. So please let us know in the comments who you are, where you're from, what you do. Okay, and Britt is going to answer all your questions about feedback, receiving, giving, processing, whatever it is when it comes to feedback in the product management profession. So make sure to comment with your questions, and that's it. I am off. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much. Wow, this is really exciting. Super glad to be here. I'm so sorry that we couldn't have done this in person, but hopefully one day soon, right? So yeah, please do share comments. I have my phone right here, so I can see all your comments and questions. And as Maria mentioned, it would be just great to get to know you a little bit because I cannot see your faces today. So let's begin. As Maria mentioned before, we often say that feedback is a gift. And honestly, I don't know about you, but so many times in my life, I just said, wow, where is the gift receipt for this gift? I want to go to the store. I want to get something more fun. Leave me alone. I didn't need this gift. So if you've ever had this thought or feeling at all, then you're in the right place. Hopefully today I will help. I will not change your mind, I don't think so, but maybe give you some tips and pointers to maybe start thinking about things a little bit differently. So as I mentioned, I'm really, really sorry that we couldn't be in person today, but in addition to the comments, I don't even know how many people we are here. What we can try to do in order to interact a little bit, we'll do this test and we'll see if it works out for us. I'd like to ask you two things. So first, as mentioned, feel free to write your comments throughout with questions, remarks, anything at all. Throughout the presentation today, I'll do my best to leave some spaces in between, so not just at the end. And we'll answer questions, all your questions, as quickly as I can. So please do that throughout our time together. And another thing, as I mentioned, we'll do a test and see how it works. So try to join, please, to our Slido, to slido.com. So please take your device and go to, wait, I need to see that it's working. Take your device. You can either scan the QR code or go to slido.com and see, enter the pin, enter the pin, please. And yeah, and we'll see if it's, we'll try to see if this interaction works for us. I did a few questions to see if we can touch base together. So before we even begin to talk about feedback, why is it important, good one, bad one, and so on, what I would love to ask you is try to remember one event that you had when you had this positive feedback moment. So when I say feedback moment, I don't mean just feedback that is very formal. So like performance review or exams or tests or anything that is very, very formal. Try to think about a moment, even a very informal one that you had. It can be an advice that you got in a very informal conversation, and it can be just some tip that you got even in a very quick coffee conversation. So in really 1 or 2 words, think about what made this experience positive for you. So yeah, I don't know how many people we have here, but honesty is a very good answer. If you have more, if anyone wants to comment with anything, feel free to do that. I'll wait a little bit longer. And you can think about different things that made this experience positive. It can be things about the content itself. So what exactly did you hear? If the advice itself was good, for example, if it made you think about things differently, and so on. Another thing can be around maybe, like, honestly, how it was delivered to you. This is also another way to think about it. Confirmation is another great answer here. It's about how things were delivered. And another thing could be maybe about the context in which the feedback was given to you. So maybe it was just at the right time. Maybe it was just by the right people. There are so many different factors that actually make this moment very positive and sometimes very, very meaningful for us, and help us actually change our maybe behavior later. So I'm sure that you all had many, many moments like that. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Yeah, awareness for your strengths, for your influence. Very great one. So it made you feel aware. It made you feel good. These are all very, very good ones. If you think about these moments in your experience, I'm sure you'll find a lot more attributes, let's say, that made this experience, that made this moment a positive moment for you. And as I mentioned, I think we can think about this in 3 different lenses. One is the content. So what exactly was said? The other one is delivery, how the feedback was given to you. And the third one is the setting or the context, which is when and where the feedback was given to you, maybe by whom also. So this is the context in which the feedback was delivered. So if we think about all these great attributes, honesty, confirmation, awareness, just good advices, caring people, a lot of these great attributes for this very great moment. What if we had more moments like that or filled with these attributes in our lives? It could unlock for us a lot of great things. Our personal growth, how can we grow and improve as professionals, as humans, as teammates, as members, as managers. Another thing, it can help us to build a very healthy team, because the conversations between the team will be healthier, more open. Other people would feel like they're growing, which would also help with a team culture. And another thing is that it can help us build user empathy. And user empathy is, as all PMs know, is in the core of building great products, and essentially being able to deliver great products, which is what we all are here for. So the goal for us is really to try to build as many moments like that as possible. And with that, I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more, even though Moria said all of the important things before. My name is Britt. Currently, I am a product manager at Meta. I'm based in London. I'm very, very Israeli. So I started my journey actually in different startups as an engineer and then as a manager. And then I was keen on moving to London. So I did the entire process. It took some time. And I remember at the moment where it actually happened and I got my visa and everything was starting to happen, I remember sitting down with my friends and told them, oh my God, how am I going to do this? I'm so Israeli. I'm so direct. How would I be able to work and to communicate and to build relationship with these English people that I thought are very, was very indirect and very implicit and very polite and so on. And my friends told me, well, you're nice. It will be fine. You'll be able to build relationship. That's what you do very well. It will be okay. Well, I told them, I might be nice, maybe, who knows? I might be nice, but I'm a nice Israeli. So still, there's this very big culture gap and communication gap between Israel and, in that case, England. It was very quick for me to understand that London is filled with non-British people. And I was very quick to understand that the gap that I needed to solve was not just Israel and England, was actually a cultural gap between Israel and everywhere, all of the different countries. And also as a PM, needed to make sure that I facilitate also the gaps between all of these different countries among themselves, or different cultures among themselves. So it made the challenge much more, much wider than I expected, than I actually thought. And one thing that can actually help to bridge the gap is to create very open conversations. And some of this conversation, a big part of them is around feedback and creating this feedback moment, creating this very open, helpful moments that help each other grow and help us all create a very healthy collaborative culture. This feedback loop has a few different parts of it that all feed into one another. Soliciting feedback, then we'll talk about receiving the feedback, and also giving feedback. They're all very much attached to each other. And again, as leaders in your team, people see how you receive feedback and how you give feedback. They will do the same. They will behave the same. They will create the same behavior and the same habits. And this is exactly what you want. So today we'll talk about some tips, some best practices in each. I forgot about this part. So when I just came and I started my journey, as I mentioned before, in startups, in Israeli startups, and suddenly what everyone started to talk about as I moved to this international big company was about performance review and how everyone is so scared about them. I see this dog and I just want to, in my head, I hear tum, tum, tum. This is extremely scary for many new people who are not used to this. So performance reviews are done in different ways, but a big part of it is getting feedback. So either you go and ask for feedback or your manager would go and ask for feedback about you from different partners that you work with. And this is a very scary moment. Now, if you think about it, one of the reasons, or the main reason that it's very, very scary is because it is an unknown moment. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what they're going to say about you. And this is very scary. So what do you do when something is very unknown? You try to make the unknown known. In other words, you try to uncover your blind spots. And this is a very nice, cute exercise that is really nice to do actually when you start with a new team or a new country or a new project maybe, and you're not sure what do you know about the relationships that you have with the people. So a cute exercise to do would be to take some challenge or some event or something that happened to you. And then the first step for you is to kind of list what did you do, how did you behave, what were the outcomes. In this example, for example, I presented a strategy and the team was not very much engaged. And I wasn't sure what it means. Obviously, I wanted them to give more input, to be excited, to be not excited, anything. And the team was not engaged enough. So this is my first step to say, okay, this was the event, that's what I did. And the second thing for me to do, the next step would be to list how do I think that people interpreted the situation. So for example, people might thought that I was not clear, or I was not concise enough. Maybe I was talking too much. Maybe I didn't listen enough to their cues or to any feedback or input that they gave, or a lot of different reasons. So try to list all these things, whether you think they're true or not. Try to list those. And in the third step, what you do is you go and gather the actual feedback. So you go and ask people for how did they perceive the situation. And I'll share in a second, we'll talk about how do you gather feedback in a healthy way. And then you have what is your perception? What do you think that people thought? And then you have the feedback. So what actually people thought. So you can look at both of them and try to find your blind spots. Try to understand what are the things that you thought you know about the team, you thought that they know, that they think about you, but actually the situation is different. So this is kind of a nice exercise when you just start, maybe with new partners or new teams. Let's talk a bit about how to actually get the feedback, because it could be easy to come and ask someone, hi, how am I doing? Or do you have any feedback for me? And this is something that often people do. I think that you'll quickly find that if you ask for a vague feedback, you'll hear vague responses. So you will not get anything that is useful enough for you to do. So the first thing that you want to make sure that you do, that you are being very, very specific. Ask about a specific event, a specific deliverable, like the strategy that we created, the roadmap that we created, this presentation that we had yesterday, or maybe it can also be a skill. So it can also be something that you work on. I work on my presentation style, and I work on my about behavior, maybe how do I get input from people, and I go and ask people about that. The second thing is to make sure that you demonstrate support and that you demonstrate care. So some interesting thing to do here is first to make sure you're very open and vulnerable. Often you gather the feedback because you want to improve something in yourself, because later on you want to be better in your job, which is a lot about better supporting your team. So you can come and say something very open like, hi, I'm working on making sure that people in the team feel heard. This is a skill I'm working on. How do you think I'm tracking against it? And maybe you can be even more specific. How do you think I did in the last team meeting? Did I demonstrate it or not? Another small and actually you'll find effective tip is to make sure that your phrasing is supportive. So instead of asking about what did I do wrong, try asking how can I do better? This is helpful. It kind of sets the tone. Sometimes people are feeling conscious or unconscious. They don't feel that comfortable sharing negative feedback. And this is something that they can actually help them think about the way that they're giving feedback differently. And another thing around the setting is to make sure that you make space. This is extremely important with everything that you do. So never put anyone on the spot. Always ask, give a heads up, and then follow up. So come and say, hey, I would love for in our next meeting, we'll spend some time about feedback. If you can give me some feedback about X and Y. It gives people time to think. It gives people time to phrase. This is highly important. And they also feel like you're treating their feedback you're giving it enough space and importance. So these behaviors are very important, very simple, but also I found at least very impactful. Something that I want us to also mention is to consider the channel in which you ask for feedback. And this is something that for me was actually quite surprising how impactful this thing was. I remember having one of my teams, I had a designer originally from India, very sharp designer, very sociable, was so great to work with. Every time that we were very sociable and happy team. In every meeting, we were feeling very open with each other, talking about a lot of things, brainstorming about ideas and so on. And something that I found was that this designer had, whenever the conversation was about giving feedback to someone who created something, like created for me a strategy, or maybe there was this roadmap or a plan to launch something, they would suddenly be silent and would not really share a lot of feedback. And that was very strange for me. And I chatted with him about it later on. And what he mentioned to me is that this is not his style. He doesn't feel so comfortable giving feedback that way out in the open with everyone. So he does feel open with the team, but he would prefer to do it in another way. So we talked about different channels that could fit him and could fit other people in the team. And we actually found that there are many different channels that sometimes for different reasons could fit different people. Now, we could say this is his fault, he needs to work on that, and that could be right or wrong. But when we try to solicit feedback and to make sure that people in the team are included and are being heard, especially when we have in mind that we have different cultures, as we mentioned, there are sometimes other personalities mix match. Sometimes there are some language barriers. I have it every day. And therefore, some people would prefer different channels. So we need to make the next step to decide on the channels that work for us, for the team, and for specific individuals, and make sure that we lay the ground. So think about those with your team. My advice is be very explicit, have a very open conversations about what are the ways for us to get feedback, in which channels, and how. I was also surprised, for example, on what effect did we always, doing retrospect meeting in a group obviously is something that is very important to do. I was actually quite surprised on the impact of some retros that I and the engineering manager, for example, were present in. And sometimes when we let the team do it by themselves without us, it actually, for some teams, it actually made a difference. So try to understand what is the setting that worked for you, and set expectations, be very explicit about it so everyone knows what are the right ways for them to, that are available for them to give feedback. Cool. Let's talk about receiving the feedback, because gathering without actually receiving anything, it doesn't really help. And also, we very often are just being given feedback. Sometimes we're not even asking for it. It can be feedback about ourselves, about the team, about maybe your reports if you're a manager, maybe about the product itself. This is also feedback. And this slide is really the key for your growth, honestly. So the first thing to remember is to always be appreciative. Even if you don't agree with the feedback, you might decide not to take it later. But the fact that someone spent their time and effort and attention to give you feedback, this is highly important. And you want to make sure that you leave the door open and invite feedback. Some of it at some point will be very, very helpful for you. So you want to make sure that you leave the door open. So always be very, very appreciative. You actually set the tone for other people in the team to be appreciative. Now, this is the most important piece, and this is the most challenging one. When you receive feedback, something to work on, and I know that this has been a lot of work for me personally, is to make sure that you listen actively. So you want to make sure that you're not being aggressive, that you're not being overly protective, that you're not being defensive, that you listen to the feedback in curious eyes, a nice kind of exercise to do with yourself. I can say it helped me actually to think about this stuff, to think about, in the situation, think about you as a reporter. So you're actually a news reporter, or something like that, and you're interviewing maybe the person who's giving you the feedback. So what you actually want to do is to separate in any way possible between you and the feedback. So you're leaving all judgment aside, and you're separating between what you're hearing about a behavior or any event that happened or anything like that, and you. So for example, it's not that you are a rude person, but maybe something you said could be interpreted as rude to some people. So even if the person who gives you the feedback didn't deliver it in the most optimal way, it's still on you to interpret it in a way that would support you. So this is a highly important piece, how you listen actively, being an active listener There are some more tips about it online, that if this is a challenge for you, and I think for a lot of us, at least the emotional ones, I can say about myself that this has been a challenge for me. This is something that in order to really grow, this is something to actually work on a bunch. And the third thing, like we had before, and it will continue to repeat itself, make sure that you make space. So never react emotionally, and it's always it's always better to say, thank you, I need some time to process, and then come back with a thoughtful follow-up and response. And I'm saying that because I feel like in our culture, we like things done quick. So we come in quickly, we react quickly, we order food quickly, everything. We're not used to be waiting for anything at all. But in this interaction, this is a time that we have to make sure that we remind ourselves to make space, to give space. This is where the magic happens. This is where we actually grow. This is where we actually create meaningful and strong relationships. So I will, before I'm stopping for a second, this is what you do after you listened very carefully and you played the role of the reporter, the news reporter here, when you asked whoever gave you the feedback all the questions about their perspective. The next thing for you to do, as objectively as you can, try to create a growth plan for yourself. This is, again, assuming that you made the decision to take the feedback. The feedback is an opinion, and you don't necessarily have to take every feedback. But the one that you chose to take, you want to take it and break it into 3 pieces. One is the growth area. Again, my advice for you is to try to write it down as if you're a reporter. So try to be as objective as you can. Here is an example. People feel that I focus too much on constructive areas instead of recognizing everyday success. So this is something that people feel. I'm not saying that this is me as a person, and I'm not saying that this always happens, but this is something that I can say this is a growth area for me. And then I list a few tactics to test in order to improve that area. Not every tactic will succeed, right? We're product managers. We do tests and experiments all the time. Some succeed, some fail. This is part of the game. This is fair. This is just some ideas to how to help us actually make progress. Try to be as tangible as you can. And the third thing would be, how do we track progress? So how are we making sure that we're keeping ourselves accountable? Who do we ask feedback? When? How do we make sure that we're looking at a progress in a way that would keep us accountable, that we will see at some point in time that we actually succeeded and that we improved. I don't want to say resolved, but we improved. Stopping for a second, I have a question here from Lior. Can you please share one tip for building trust? Yes, of course. That enables the other side to feel comfortable sharing truly honest feedback. Yes, we'll talk about it a little bit more and how important is building trust. Something that I want to say is that you actually, the flywheel that we saw before, and I actually have it here, this flywheel of giving feedback and soliciting and receiving feedback is something that is, we need to set the tone. So one thing to do is to make sure that you're giving that you're showing others how to gather the feedback. You talk to, if you have a specific person, try to wait, I'm reading the question. Truly honest feedback. So if you have a specific person in mind, you need to start building the relationship with them. Something that really worked for me is honestly to have very open conversations about how do we share feedback with each other. So sometimes it can be, as I mentioned before, just about the channels that some people don't feel comfortable with it. And this is something that could be very helpful. So maybe if you think about ideas of even sending forms, so it doesn't have to be this specific person, but like a specific person shares feedback about yourself. Maybe you can talk about what are ways that we can make sure that in the team, everyone can share feedback about our processes or about how we behave to each other or something like that. Maybe, for example, this person would suggest having a forum or having office hours or something like that. So ask them what is a good way to do that. And sometimes this actually is very helpful and would give you a lot of ideas that would be helpful for other people. And I think, let's talk about it in a second. How do you make sure that you show care to other people? I do think that this is something that highly helps to create the trust. I'm going to continue for a second and we'll come back to the trust point in a bit. So we talked about giving feedback. Gathering feedback and asking and receiving feedback. I can share with you that giving feedback was also not very easy for me. Even lately, in the past few years, when I was thinking about the performance review, I was thinking that every feedback that I give to anyone is very detrimental to their career. And if I say something bad, they can get hurt, they can get fired, their manager could get mad at them. I don't know. I thought that I was just very uncomfortable because I didn't want to be in charge of anyone's fate in that way. So many times I was very uncomfortable. And what really helped me is change my approach when I prepare to giving feedback. So before you give feedback, you have to do some preparation, right? And you have to really, that's what I did at least. I reminded myself that what I'm doing right now, this is not criticism about a person. We said before, we separate the person and the action or the behavior or the event. We separate those. So I'm not criticizing, I'm not judging, especially not a person, but this is on a specific event. And the second thing is that it is very much not about me expressing myself. This is not about me having to say something for the sake of saying it. This is me helping my colleague grow and improve. And if it's not me, their PM, there will be another PM. They'll have the same issues. I want to help out. What is the best way for me to help out? So when I did this switch in my mind about how I thought about feedback, it made a lot of things much easier for me. And another thing is try to remember about the times where you received feedback. And actually we talked at the beginning at positive moments, but what were the negative feedback moments? What can you learn from them? With those, when you experience those, you actually build empathy. How can you make sure that you give a different experience when you give the feedback? So when you do this preparation, especially when it's people that you work more closely with, these are highly important. And we have some tips that are also kind of in the same spirit as the ones from before, because these are all give and receive, and it's all sides of the same flywheel, of the same loop. So when you give the feedback, make sure that you're very specific. Never say you never do this and that, or you always do this and that. Try to be very specific to a behavior, to an event, to a deliverable that this person made. And make sure that you share the impact. So the other side also build empathy and understand why this feedback matters. So, for example, when you said at the meeting something to Rebecca, it could have sounded rude, and it made her feel uncomfortable, and I'm concerned that it would affect the culture in the team. So this is just an example. Just make sure that you make the impact very clear. And another thing is, this is very important. Make sure that you take a minute to show care. Take a minute and say something about the struggle that you see that the other person is having, or the challenge, or the progress, or try to make sure that you voice it, even if for one sentence. As for example, I noticed that the meeting was challenging for you. Let's talk about it. So the acknowledgement is a key thing here. And this is something that actually helps build a lot of trust. Back to the question about trust. There is this great book called Radical Candor by Kim Scott, and it really doubles down on that. How do you give feedback as leaders, especially in a way that creates trust and in a way that helps people grow? So she talks about sort of the same things that we mentioned here. How do you make sure that your feedback is both direct, or what I called here specific, and also that you show that you care about the person? So I really highly recommend to check this book if you want to double down on how do you deliver feedback and create the trust while doing so. This is a great read, I think. The last thing, as I mentioned before, give space. So make sure first that you prepare, that you don't make anything on the spot, and also make sure that you listen. You listen a lot. You give space to react. You give space to ask you a question. You give space for the other person to process the feedback that you just gave them. Don't even expect them to react at the spot. This is not healthy. This is not expected of you. This is not expected of them. So these are mostly about giving feedback. I'm going to check questions for a second. Stakeholders. How do I deal with stakeholders who agree with the feedback given, but don't take steps to change their behavior? This is a good one. I think that's something that we can do. So if we have stakeholders, it depends on the type of partnership, right? I think if you're in the place to coach them and to help them grow, then you can actually help them. We talked before about creating a growth plan and so on. Maybe you can try to find ways, formal or a bit informal ways, to do that, to give them idea, to maybe help them be accountable for something, give them some advices. I think that might help, so that you help them, you coach them. Honestly, I'll say sometimes we're not always managers. This is very much for product managers, right? The ultimate person, and we want to do as much as we can to help our peers grow and to help our colleagues grow. A part of our work, though, is to also escalate when needed. So this is also part of, as far as I see it, the PM expectations. And sometimes we often think about escalations when we talk about product or impact and so on. My point here is that behaviors and the team culture is just as important, sometimes is more important than the short-term growth or success of the product. So this is also something, in my opinion, that you're accountable for. Meaning, if you've done everything that you can, it is also on your responsibility to go to the managers and make sure that you give the feedback. Like we said here, the same type of principles. Give the same feedback to your manager, to his manager, so that the manager can help the stakeholder improve. That's my advice about that. And again, escalation is a whole other topic, highly important though, both in behaviors and in both in culture and behaviors, as well as the product success. A few quick points about giving feedback. So a part of what we mentioned just right now is first to consider unconscious bias. I'm not going to talk about it again because it's a whole other topic, but something that you might want to do is at the very least, whenever you give or you prepare to give some feedback, try to ask yourself, would I give the same feedback if that person was a man or a native English speaker or any other group? This is extremely important, especially when you're giving feedback to underrepresented groups. So again, it's a whole other topic and world, but this is just one small tip to hold yourself accountable, apart from educating yourself and making sure that you're aware of these biases. Another interesting thing, we talked before about different cultures. Culture differences is a huge thing, and just make sure that you consider that. I'll tell you a quick story about me and culture differences. Recently, I had a really great counterpart, DS manager, data science manager, who was originally from Malaysia. In our first conversation, she mentioned to me how direct she is, and some people say that it's too much. And I said, oh, that's great. I'm Israeli. I'm direct as well. We'll get along just fine. That's awesome. And we actually, we got along really well. And then there was this one meeting where she was supposed to deliver something. It was late. It was a few hours before we had a massive leadership review. And then she said in the meeting, oh, let's just maybe push back the meeting. And I said that I think this would be very unprofessional of us if we do that, because it's last minute and we're supposed to be ready with it and so on. Apparently, she took that comment very, very hard. And later on, we followed up with a conversation, and she mentioned to me how offended she was, especially since there were more people in the room. And she was very offended. I didn't even think that I said something too rude. And it was not directly about her. But apparently, she interpreted as being very direct about her. And also the fact that there was another colleagues of our in the meeting made her feel very, very bad. So I thought that was very, very interesting, because if she's so direct, I'm so direct, how come we're in this situation? I was very confused. Then very recently, I read a really interesting book called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. And this book essentially talks about the fact that cultures have these 8 attributes that each of them is on a scale. And what you can do is actually for each different culture, so different country, let's say, you can put the country on the scale. And that's how you can compare. If your culture is way more direct than others, if the leadership style is more hierarchical than the others, or more top-down than the others, and so on. So this is kind of help you to place yourself and then to figure out the gaps. What's interesting here is that finally I realized that the communication and how direct the communication, which is what we see here as the first attribute, is very different from evaluating, like how direct the negative feedback is. And also, it's very different from disagreeing, how confrontational you can be, how out in the open you can be about disagreements or different feedback. So just the fact that these are different, meaning there could be a very direct culture, but negative feedback is being very indirect in it. For me, that was a new thing. So so this book is very interesting. I think that now the culture, at least in my experience, the cultures, especially if you work in a more international setting, like London, like the US, the cultures are a bit more mixed, but this book really helps to build a lot of empathy and understand where different cultures, different people come from different reasons. So it really helps to build that and to be more aware of a lot of things. So yeah, so highly recommend this one. We talked about trust before. So honestly, with all these complexities about personalities, about cultures, trust is really a key. So if you can build and do spend time and effort in building strong personal and caring relationships, that would help you remove many of the barriers. So I highly recommend you make sure that you have a list of your key counterparts, and you do whatever it takes to build strong relationships with them. And it can be even in the small feedback moments that we talked about, even in the small conversations, the coffee conversations, the small moments that you have between meetings. Building those with all the tips that we talked about today, making sure that you spend some time, a moment, to also give a positive feedback, that you make sure that when you give any type of feedback, you acknowledge the other person's efforts and struggles and so on. This actually goes a long way. Also, just the fact that you ask for feedback, that you solicit feedback for yourself, from my experience, really helps people understand that you try to grow, that you're also willing to be vulnerable with them. And if you do it correctly and in a sensitive and thoughtful way, it also helps build trust. It sets the tone actually for the entire team and how you all build your feedback and your conversational culture. So try to make sure that you actually do put a lot of attention in how you give and how you receive the feedback. It could be the small things that would have a massive impact. Small thing, make sure that you set expectations together. We talked about feedback channels, the feedback styles, the timing. So do we do a retrospect once a quarter? Do we do a retro after every launch? Do we give feedback in one-on-ones? Just the channels and the timing, being explicit about them, helps people understand where can they speak up, what's the right way, and they can prepare themselves and build towards that. And it actually helps people feel more comfortable sharing. Lastly, I want to mention that if it's uncomfortable, it just means that it's working. As I've shared before, both giving and receiving feedback can feel very uncomfortable for different reasons. And that's good. It just means that you're building empathy. It means that the next time that you'll be in the other side of the equation, you will know to behave a little bit better because you'll understand the other side a little bit more. What else? So I'm going to stop for a second and see if we have any questions. Yeah, the beer reporter one is a good one. Anything else we want to look at? No. Okay.
Hi, Britt. No other comments.
Maria?
But we can take questions or, think of questions of ourselves.
So we can take questions. We can have questions. We can ask for questions if you have any. I do have one more bonus if we have.
So go ahead and I will join you in just a few.
So a bonus for you. I want to tell you, ask you a question. I'll tell you about something that happened to me in one of my teams. So we had a very important launch coming up, and everyone were looking forward to it because it was supposed to give a lot of growth to the product, which we really needed, and it was our goal, like our opportunity to reach our goals. our product marketing manager decided or suggested some go-to-market or launch dates that would massively delay the growth that we have expected. The engineering manager and the data scientists didn't understand, were kind of against it, gave very, in our conversations, both one-on-one for me with them and in the team conversation, were very much against that. And therefore, after some time, we had to escalate it. So we went to leadership. We were all together in a room. We mentioned the problem. The PMM mentioned the launch dates and so on. And suddenly, the same people who gave bad feedback before said, yes, let's go and do that. And on private, they messaged to me, hey, let's leave it like that. Like we don't want to appear as unsupportive in front of leadership. We talked about it too much. Let's just do whatever and move on. And I was kind of very shocked. I feel like it was an unhealthy way to handle this the situation. Because if you have feedback, you should give the feedback. You should open and own the feedback. Later on, we can make any decision that we want. And my question with me and myself at that meeting was, do I want to speak up? Do I want to share, hey, this is the feedback that I've heard. We're concerned about this launch. We're concerned about the way that the feedback was given, and kind of be very open about that. So this is a real question. If you would speak up instead of other people to raise their voice, to raise the feedback that you heard from them or not. This happens a lot to me at least. I have a lot of empathy to my team members, and I want to, for me, a healthy culture is a culture that can speak to each other. And sometimes they take the other person's voice. If they don't share their voice, then I would often be the one who does it for them. And I always struggle with this question: if I want to raise the voice, if I want to speak up for other people or not. Moria, what would you do?
Well, you know that I'm a very direct person, very direct one. And I think that the balance, the key to answer your question is the balance between being kind of like a team player, right? And really reading the environment and understanding what the situation is, and owning your thoughts and ideas and the way you perceive things. So to me, it's the balance between the two, where I think that one big factor is going back to the fact that everything we are discussing right now is about culture. I will segment the issues that we're discussing between things that have to do with culture, where you want to defend a team member or someone in the department, even if you're the only one to do that. And situation where it's more about our individual gain as professionals, where I may choose to leave things aside. But from my experience, I don't think there was never one single time where I felt that I did the wrong thing by standing up for someone else on my team and build a culture that truly affects in a positive way.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that here I have here a few tips that I learned from this few situations. I think a key thing here is to really try to be the facilitator here, and to really try to prioritize the long-term culture, just as you say right now, over either personal gain or short-term outcome, again, either for you or for the team or for the product. So the long-term culture, this is something to try to prioritize, meaning try to facilitate the conversation between the different parties if possible. try to coach other people on how to have these open conversations and how to give feedback to each other. So you can do that in the group, but also try to later on follow up with just feedback moments and feedback conversations with your peers, especially the ones who had hard time giving feedback, but also with the ones who, in this case, for example, the product marketing manager, part of her role, in my opinion, is to be able to create open conversations to make sure that other people feel comfortable giving feedback to her. And if they don't, this is a feedback that I would need to give her in order to build this culture that everyone can give feedback to each other. What we did later is to take this opportunity to iterate on the feedback channels. So we made some adjustment. In this case, for example, we decided that on some deliverables, in this case, like the launch plan, to give all the feedback and to give a very explicit sign-off on documents instead of just doing it in conversations. Because again, not always, as we talked about before, not always everyone feel comfortable giving feedback in conversations with multiple people. So this is, again, something to think about. Well, this was my bonus question for you. So thank you for Moria, for the conversation, and everyone. That's all I have for you today. I had the best time.
And we're still here. We're still here because there is a question from the audience. We already received so much from you. You see this, the gift of feedback, as we call it. So we already received that feedback, but we also have a question from the audience because Erez is here to ask, how important is it to have a pre-feedback preparation prior to the actual feedback session, kind of like setting the ground, and what are the key points you would focus on or communicate ahead of time? That's a great question.
Pre-feedback, so my question here is, when we say pre-feedback preparation, if we mean we prepare the feedback, or if we prepare the feedback?
I don't know. Erez, please comment in the chat and let us know. Let's say, go ahead.
I can comment that, and this is something, by the way, that I was not very aware of. So in the book that I mentioned before, the culture map, there are actually a few really good examples that I was blown away, because I haven't thought about this. I haven't had the chance to experience this type of situations. But different cultures actually, expect you to give them negative feedback or bad news in chunks, and kind of say something vague at the beginning so you don't surprise them. I think it really depends on the culture, on the person, and so on. And also it depends on the magnitude of the impact that this feedback or news would have on the person. Normally, I would say if you can not surprise someone, that's better. So I would say, I think that normally, again, these are things that you have to build with a specific person, the relationship, the type of communication channels, and so on. But normally, if you can create to not surprise someone, to start giving some chunks beforehand of the feedback, it also shows that you're not hiding things from them, and kind of laying the ground before big news come in. So I think for big things, I think this is actually highly important. Depends on how impactful the feedback and the change would be.
I couldn't agree more, and I will add just a tiny thing on what you just said, that I think by sharing kind of like a chunk of it ahead of time, it also allows the other person to feel that this is real feedback and not just a pushback, because you show that there was like kind of like a process here. There was a person thinking about that before, processing it, and then you got into this discussion and you actually discussed that. So this was a great one. And Rachel is asking to see the slide again, the culture graph.
So
Yes.
this is not a real, wait, share screen. So that was just like a demonstration for, wait, is it working?
You can do it. You can do it. Choose it, and then I'll put it on the screen.
Katana. Okay, here. Cool.
Yeah.
So this is the dots here don't mean anything. This was just for me to kind of demonstrate what the book talks about. What is relevant is the different attributes. So in the book, she talks about each of the attributes. What do they mean, and how do you deal with the different gaps? Essentially, she gives a lot of strategy and a lot of tactics. So for this slide, disregard the actual points, the actual dots here. What it means is that each culture would be on a different place in the scale relative to another culture. And it just helps to understand where each person is coming from.
Perfect. And in the meantime, we have Ares commenting and saying that his question was about the preparation for the feedback giving. Okay, so we are the product manager who gives the feedback. So let's go back to your answer before. So send something ahead of time, a chunk of it, so the person will know what is heading
Yeah.
towards them. Let's call it this way, and they won't be surprised. Um, what else we can do? Maybe set
I,
like make yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what's really helpful actually is to share something that is written quite informal if possible, as in for big companies, for example, we actually have these systems where every feedback that you write is being documented and so on. If you can give something written in an informal way, like an email or chat or something like that, to make sure that the person, to let them review it, to let it sink in, to let them be with the feedback for a while. We talked about giving space. This is exactly that, especially if it's a negative feedback that can impact them. This would let them prepare for the conversation with you as well. It would let them, when I say prepare, is to come to not be surprised, and also to not come with emotions, and can talk to you about it from a more thoughtful and rational place. So normally, I think this is very helpful, and try to make sure that you make the follow-up explicit. So you'll say, okay, here's something that you sent something written, and say, here is something that I want us to discuss about. Here are some of my thoughts. Let's talk about it face to face, because this is important to create the trust in the relationship. Let's talk about it maybe next week or wherever, so that they know when the follow-up would come, and they know that they would actually have a human conversation about it as well.
Yes, and we can we can look at it in a way that there is a certain level of anxiety that will come
Yes.
with it. So once you divide it within two times, the time that the other person is receiving the email or chat or text or whatever it is, and knowing something is coming, and the actual event. So you take this X amount of anxiety and you divide between two times. So it means that necessarily the other person is going to be at least a little bit
Sure.
calmer at the second event when it's going to happen. I had such a great time. Britt, how was it for you?
I had the best time. I wish we could be in person and see all these
Yes.
awesome
Sometime
people.
soon. I
Yes.
hope. I hope sometime soon, and maybe with all of our leaguers in the audience. Who knows? Hopefully, good and calm days will come soon, and we'll have offline events as we used to have before. Thank you so much, Britt. From
Thank
London,
you so much.
this was Britt Barak product manager at Meta. And I'm Moya Cassis. This is Product League, where we are helping you to become the best product manager you can be by having the best people in the industry answering your questions. Thank you so much to everyone who joined us for this session today. Thank you everyone for watching us. Can't wait to see you at our next session. Until then, go league it up. And Britt, again, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The greatest time. Thank you.
Me too.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.